It's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's the Glute guys.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Glute Guys Network. We have another special guest, Dr. Travis Pollen, exercise science professor, injury prevention researcher, personal trainer, PhD, and NPTI certification. Travis, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, gentlemen.
Excited to have you on here, Travis. Excited to hear all about you and your story.
So I guess we'll start. Easy question. How did your fitness journey start, and how has it impacted your career and personal life?
I like a good, easy question to start.
Yeah.
We can go back a ways. I was born missing my left leg, so that is the context around this. And I, growing up, had a bit of a hard time finding a sport that I could compete in with my peers on like a level playing field. So, I did the Little League baseball, Junior Jewish Basketball League, but gradually noticed that I was slowing down. I mean, it doesn't help that I'm 5'6". Like, that's not a good recipe for a basketball player, right? But slowing down relative to my peers. And so I was kind of searching for an athletic identity into middle school, high school. Tried out for the golf team. That was a mistake. But my sophomore year of high school, I tried out for the swim team, which was kind of a crazy thing to do. Like, I didn't have any swimming background besides my neighbor's pool, but I loved swimming and I was comfortable in the water. And luckily, the year that I joined the team, they didn't make any cuts. So I made the team. If I had tried out a year later, I probably wouldn't be talking to you guys because my whole life would have turned out different. But I made the team, and that was kind of the beginning of what led me to my whole career, because part of being an amputee competing against able-bodied athletes was, okay, I have a disadvantage here, but if I can do things outside the pool, like from a nutrition standpoint or from a strength training standpoint or recovery or sports psych, I can get a quote unquote leg up on the competition, as I like to say. So, unbeknownst to me that this was going to be a career, I went to the library because I'm a nerd, and I went to the section in the library and I got out all the books, right? Self-massage, Pilates, mental training for peak performance, nutrition. And I just devoured these books, and I got like a bodybuilding book by Bill Pearl, who's like this old-time bodybuilder. And I was like in the basement of the YMCA, this dingy gym with this book, like doing leg extensions. And that was kind of the beginning for me. I just fell in love with the process. And I didn't realize necessarily that that was going to be my career, because I kept swimming through college, but I majored in physics, which isn't quite exercise science, right? But it ended up leading me there.
A little bit of exercise science in there.
Yeah. So it ended up, I majored in physics, but at the same time, I was still very much hobby like driven into strength training, to the point where like I hired a personal trainer to help with my strength training outside the pool in college. And she was like, you really, like, you're borrowing my anatomy books. Like, you should become a personal trainer. And so wrestled with that for a little. I'm like, but I'm a physicist. And ended up needing a break from that rigorous, like, track of physics, and went and became a certified personal trainer after college. So I did a diploma program through the National Personal Training Institute, worked as a personal trainer for a year, and then realized like, this is a really hard line of work. I was working 7 days a week, much different gyms, early mornings, not making much money. And so I was like, let me go back to school. And so that's when I found the field of biomechanics, which is this perfect hybrid of physics and human movement. And so I was like, man, this was my calling, right? And it was good to have a physics background. I needed to brush up on the anatomy and physiology side, but that was easier to acquire, I would say, than the other way around. Like if you have a strong A&P background, but then you're trying to learn physics. So got my master's in biomechanics, studied amputee gait biomechanics, or amputee walking, which made sense at the time as an amputee myself, but wasn't truly my passion. So after I finished that, I took a couple years, I took 1 year, worked in a gym, a sports performance gym, in a strength and conditioning capacity. Again, realized that that was really hard work, really long hours. And so I went back to school again, this time for my PhD, which was in rehabilitation sciences. So that was really cool. It was kind of like the research side of physical therapy, doing biomechanics, but more on the injury prevention side. I was actually, my dissertation was on risk factors for injury in competitive swimmers. So just like this perfect, even if I weren't doing this degree, I would still be reading this research because, like I said, I'm that kind of geek. And so it was awesome because I was just now I was supposed to be doing this and had 4 years to just do such a deep dive into injury prevention and like how injuries happen, especially for swimmers. And then I finished, and I didn't know that I was going to be a professor. I thought that actually I was going to be a personal trainer with a PhD. And I kind of did that for a year. I started a couple of side hustles. This was also 2020 when the pandemic was going hard. So there wasn't much opportunity for work as a professor. But so I started a couple of side hustles, and then all of a sudden this job opening opened up at Thomas Jefferson University, which is where I work now. I wasn't looking, but my friend texted it to me and said, you should apply. And I thought, all right, why not? And so one thing led to another, and now I'm going into my 5th year as an undergraduate exercise science professor, which is really a full circle story because I didn't, like I said, I majored in physics, but was always really interested in exercise science, but my institution didn't have exercise science. So now I teach classes that I never actually took, which is a really interesting thing because I'm kind of like getting my degree in exercise science as I'm the person in front of the room who's supposed to know everything.
Of course.
But, I stay a couple classes ahead and nobody's the wiser.
Yeah.
There we go.
So yeah, it's a long story, but it's sort of all of those pieces kind of, tell the story of how I ended up where I ended up in it. And if any of those things hadn't happened even 20 years ago, I wouldn't be talking to you guys. So
And it's amazing that that's how it happened. I love just fate for that reason. It's like all of this started because we dove in a pool. We wanted to try for a swimsuit.
Yeah, I think about that often. Like if I hadn't dove in I remember diving into the first practice, and I remember waking up the next morning and barely being able to put my shirt on because my arms were so sore, and then going back like the next day and the next day. And amazingly, within a year, I was like fairly competent. Like, and I guess I'm athletic, and the pool was this awesome equalizer because some of the strokes, especially the ones that I gravitated towards, which was freestyle and backstroke, you can get away with not kicking that hard, especially in longer races. I ended up actually being more of a sprinter, which is kind of funny, but it wasn't such a disadvantage. And so, like I said, if I outworked everybody and I did everything outside the pool, I was like an okay high school swimmer and competent enough to show up to college and not get laughed out of the pool, right?
Yeah.
I was fine in a Division III college setting. I was very competitive with the women on the team.
I know the feeling. I was a high school swimmer too. Grew up swimming. I was gonna try to swim in college, but my college was Division I, and I gave it a shot, and I was just like, yep, no, I don't want to. This is a full-time job instead. Now this isn't fun anymore.
Story. And yeah, D1 athletes, like, more power to them, because being a student athlete at any level is hard, and being a student athlete where the athlete part is scholarship driven and high stakes, that's really like hats off to those.
Oh
people.
yeah.
Yeah, I could see a lot of parallels for myself too. I never was a swimmer. Except for at grandma's pool. But I played football. I did shot put and discus in high school, and then in college I played rugby, actually with Tommy. And I really just like the strength training part of it. And I was not good at nutrition, honestly, in college because, you know, you have the buffet and I made sure I ate the buffet every day.
The calf
Well,
cookies.
that was the best part of being a swimmer is that like you couldn't eat enough.
Yeah.
So I'm like eating 3 huge meals a day and carrying out cereal like as much as I can carry in 2 hands out of the dining hall to take with me to the library. So, and then
Yeah.
going down to the library when the free snacks came out at like 10 o'clock or whatever.
Yeah, like
yeah.
for frame of reference, my biggest ever was like sophomore year of college, and I probably weighed like 300 pounds. But there was definitely a little bit too much fat there. But
You were a rugby player.
yeah, but the strength was like nothing like it is now. Now that I'm like 70 pounds lighter than that. Like for frame of reference, I always go to bench. Now I can maybe bench like 315 maybe one time, and I used to be able to rep it out, and it was like not a hard weight for me, but it makes sense. You're 70 pounds heavier, and the weight feels a little bit easier.
Yeah, but it's funny though, like loving the training aspect of it, like the strength training aspect, maybe more than the actual sport itself.
Yeah,
I was maybe kind of there at the end, and now, well, definitely there at the end actually, because I didn't swim for a really long time afterwards, but I strength trained, you know, every day almost, and watched people do it for my job, right? So it's just funny how like you find one thing and you love it, but then you find something more that you love maybe even more.
Yeah, and then like that's the thing with physical therapy. Same thing like you do too with personal training, and even being like an exercise science, exercise physiology professor. Like you have to look into the body mechanics of everything. You have to learn how to get people to move better. So yeah, there's a lot of definitely overlap in different places. And even going into like all that research stuff. If you don't know biomechanics, you can't really do a lot of research on that stuff either.
Yeah. No, it was having the physics background what made me really versatile in what I could do for in a lot of respects, just from the understanding the physics to having some computer science background with like I'm not a good coder, but like enough to be able to do things that other people who were studying what I was studying had a harder time like learning, whereas I had a good background in it, so that was helpful. And just being extremely analytical in terms of the way I solve problems, and like I don't do that much physics anymore, but the problem solving and the logical thinking really carried over into what I do now for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure like the physics background gave you just a different perspective compared to those who were like immediately going into the field of like that style of research too. So you have a whole different outlook on it, which is awesome as well.
Yeah, and I mean maybe the biggest thing is just like not being afraid of numbers. Like not to knock you guys, I remember taking a PT class. It was a functional anatomy and biomechanics class, and like the professor put an equation on the board, and I looked around and like 60 other students were just like shaking in their boots. I'm like, yo, chill. Like this is basic algebra, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean, to be honest with you, when we were in like PT school, well, Tommy was here before me, but that doesn't matter. We had to do biology for our undergrad, and then we went right to PT school. And we had, of course, physics in undergrad, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, we're never going to use this. Like, this is so tough." My
students say that all the time.
Yeah, and I was like, I mean, it's probably a good thing to know. Like, there's probably a reason for it. And then you get to your kinesiology class in physical therapy, and you're just like, oh, I guess that physics stuff was important for all these, like the body moving around.
The whole body is made of levers. It's all physics.
It's so true. And I think that stuff's so important. And then so that my background lends itself to that, right? And I wonder, okay, if you come from more of a biology or physiology background, then when you look at the Krebs cycle, are you like, oh my God, this is so important. I have to know every reaction of every phase of this thing because this really informs the way that I prescribe conditioning to people. Like, I don't buy into that. Like, I don't understand that hardly at all. And I don't think that makes me a worse personal trainer. But I do wonder, like, people who really do understand that stuff, if they, like, appreciate that on a deeper level than I'm able to, and find a way that it actually influences their daily practice.
I do think like every personal trainer or physical therapist, at least a good personal trainer or physical therapist, is going to find their sort of niche and what makes them good at what they do. Yeah, like for some people, maybe it is the Krebs cycle. For some people, maybe it's understanding biomechanics.
And then other people, it's like, oh, my undergrad was psychology, and I'm really interested in pain science education or psychologically informed interventions or
Yeah,
whatever, right?
which I was actually going to say something like similar to that. Like I work with a lot of people with dementia, and it's a lot more like communication than knowing how to talk to a person than it is some of the other things. Like, of course, the moving around is still important, but like, getting them to actually work with you and sort of be happy to be there too is like a whole different sort of field of thought.
I'm clipping that and I'm playing that for my exercise psychology students next year.
Sounds good.
Such a struggle. They're like, why are we taking this exercise psych class? I'm like, communication. I mean, like your job is movement, right? And teaching movement. And also, in order to do that, you really have to be able to talk to people. And y'all 30 of you who are staring at your computers right now sometimes have a hard time talking to people. So
yeah.
I mean, even in my setting too, like I'm just in your your everyday average orthopedic style physical therapy clinic, and you can tell the difference between when like a patient, and I'm sure you see it with personal training, when a patient or a client understands what the exercise goal is or what like my manual therapy goals are, and like where their pain is coming from or what the injury entailed and the mechanism of the injury and what it's going to look like all throughout its pathways. You see those connections click, and they actually, when they understand it, they get better faster.
Yeah, I believe that for sure.
Yeah, even when I was in my first clinical, like sort of like your students, I was sort of awkward. Like I just wasn't used to talking to people.
Yeah, that's normal, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Without a doubt. Like
the social awkwardness.
I've had a few students just as like a clinical instructor, and it's always like the first week or two, it's like deer in headlights. Like, what's going on right now? And then,
ask them how their day is.
No, right. It sounds funny, but it's true. Like you just have to do that sometimes. You just have to be like, just say hello, say how they're doing. Did you see something on TV? Everyone has the TV on. Like little things like that actually tend to help a lot, because then someone will want to talk to you. They're going to want to get to know you, and if you get to know them, that's probably the most important thing. Like if my patients don't want to talk to me,
if they like you and they trust you, and you build that trust by getting to know them as a person and remembering things about them, right? And following up on those things, that goes such a long way.
I guess going a little bit more into your research, what have you been looking into now? Anything new? Anything you're looking forward to getting into a little bit more?
Yeah. So I've the last 5 years, I guess, basically since. So I said I did my dissertation on injury prevention, risk factors for injury in swimmers, and that kind of more broadly spiked my interest in like two things: in injury prevention from the lens of screening, like pre-participation screening, and then from the standpoint of designing injury prevention interventions or injury prevention programs or warm-ups. So I've just over the last 5 years taken a really deep dive into those things. And when I say pre-participation screening, I'm talking, for example, about something like the functional movement screen. If that, not everybody, people call things different names. So periodic health evaluation is what physicians call it. Functional testing, whatever you want to call it. But the basic paradigm with that is, we're going to test our athletes at the beginning of the season, screen our athletes, and then that's going to give us some information about who we think is more at risk for injury, or it's going to give us information on what risk factors they possess, which is then going to help guide the intervention that we offer them. And so that is like a prevailing theme in this line of research that has not been as well founded as one might think when you go down that rabbit hole. And so like lately what I've been really trying to wrestle with and a paper that I'm working on is kind of comparing the merits of just a generic injury prevention program. So an example of that would be the 11 plus for soccer, or is really called the FIFA 11 plus or FIFA 11. And so that would be like a cookie cutter program that you would just have every high school soccer player do, versus something that has been designed more on an individual basis based on the findings from pre-participation screening, whether that's a functional movement screen or some combination of like a drop jump or a single leg landing or watching someone. There's like a million things that you could do from a screening standpoint. And so basically there is no evidence that actually compares those two approaches that says, oh, a fully individualized approach based on results from a screening test will prevent more injuries than a generic cookie cutter program.
Interesting.
So that's like kind of baffling because to me, on the surface, it seems like, well, it seems obvious that if you could tailor an injury prevention program to the athlete's unique deficits, that's going to have a stronger protective effect than giving them a cookie cutter program. But what the caveat to that is that the cookie cutter program should be, it should be, and we could argue the extent that it is, but it should be based on the most common injuries and the most severe injuries in that sport. And so when you look at that, you say, okay, well, let's say ACL injuries or hamstring strains in soccer. Let's say that the generic program, the cookie cutter program that you give to everybody really does a good job of addressing risk factors for hamstring injuries and ACL injuries. That might be better than screening an athlete and saying, well, actually, your landing mechanics are good. Your eccentric hamstring strength is good. Your maybe isokinetic quad ham, all good. So you actually don't need to do the hamstring prevention exercises and the ACL injury prevention exercises because your weaknesses are really dynamic balance and adductor strength, whatever. So, so if I tailor it to the person, but I then neglect the things that are the biggest rocks in that sport, then there's at some point I'm actually making it less. Maybe, like I said, there's no research comparing these things, but I may be making it less effective. So my kind of angle on this is I think that when you're designing injury prevention programs, you should actually do a combination of both of those things. So like, let's take the strongest risk or the injuries that are most common and most severe, and let's give every athlete prevention exercises for those injuries. And then let's sprinkle in some of their prevention exercises for some of the deficits that they present on an individual basis that are less common injuries. And like, there have been a couple people who have couple research articles that have sort of made mention of this, but nothing that has ever like concretely walked through the pros and cons of all these things and then pointed out the gap in the research, which this is what I read late at night for fun.
Yep.
I'm just like, this seems like such a fundamental, it's 2025. This seems like such a fundamental question that no one has answered. And everybody just kind of assumes that either an individualized program is better or a generic program is better. And it's hard to do research, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm not like racing to do this study myself because you would need like a dozen plus teams that all agree to do a cluster randomized controlled trial where half of them do your individualized injury prevention program with screening and half of them do the generic program, and then you see what happens in the end. But that's a big thing, and I can briefly say the other thing that I'm interested in, which is just how to design these programs in such a way that athletes are willing to do them on a consistent basis.
Yes.
Coaches are willing to adopt them. So I'm giving a talk at the National Athletic Trainers Association conference this summer on, it's called like how to design injury prevention programs that athletes and coaches embrace. And so that's the idea of like, well, what are the reasons why athletes and coaches are not doing them, and how can we break down those barriers? So it's sometimes obvious things like, oh, they need to be short. They need to not require much equipment, if anything. They need to not make athletes too sore. They need to clearly reflect the sport so that the athletes can see, oh, this is relevant to me. They need to be told probably that this is going to improve your performance, because they don't really care about injuries, especially if they've never been injured. That's not even on their radar. So they're not worried about injury prevention. So mostly things like that. But really, instead of saying, here's the program, now let me convince you to do it, it's actually stepping back and saying, like, speaking to all the stakeholders and saying, what do you want out of this program, and how can we design something that's going to work for you, as opposed to saying, well, here's the 11 plus and it's been shown to work, now you should do it. It's like, well, it generally doesn't work for people. So knowing that it has been made for them is a helpful feature. Then the challenge is, well, not when you're an athletic trainer at a high school setting, you might be 1 on 1,000 athletes, you might be 3 athletic trainers to 1,000 plus athletes. Like, how are you having the time to make sport-specific injury prevention programs for everybody? So I don't have the answer to that. I have to figure out something soon.
You have to do the research.
Giving this presentation. But so anyway, those are the things that I've been really interested in lately. Well, and for the last few years, but everything's like coming to a head right now. Yeah. Because I'm giving this talk and I'm writing this paper.
Well, you said a lot of stuff there.
I could have stopped at more discrete points to allow for feedback, but I'm really curious to hear what you all think.
I mean, we always love all of the info, and I was actually, just that end piece before I forget it, because I will brain fart this one away, definitely. Like you just said, the designing of all those programs. I wonder now, with like, the upcoming AI systems and the birth of it, if that could also help to kind of, start to generate some of these programs. And of course, even if they're generated by like the AI, the athletic trainer still needs to go through and, review and make sure, okay, is this truly tailored? So, but it could help cut some time for some of those ATs that are seeing, like you said, 1,000 athletes.
Absolutely. Like if you queried ChatGPT's deep research function, which is available to premium users, I'm an enthusiast, but it would give you a pretty darn good, like if you had just asked it, what are the most common and severe injuries in high school soccer, it will get the papers that are open access and synthesize that for you and give you a pretty good answer that might be like maybe not as good as a PhD researcher would do necessarily, especially with access to stuff that was behind paywalls too, but like enough that you would save a dozen hours and then have something that you could use to like go through the process.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
It actually makes me think of like before Tommy and I started this podcast, we were thinking about like things that we could do that we could get into. And one thing I was sort of thinking of is my brother is like a high school soccer coach, and like even going to him and trying to help them make a program to, I guess, prevent injury, improve performance. And it's actually a lot of the stuff that you were saying was the same sort of thought process I have. And the more I thought of it, I was like, wow, there's a lot to think about here. Like you said,
I'm mentoring a medical student, and like we've read 20 papers over the last 6 months, and every new paper we read, we're just like, man, that's an added level of nuance that just makes this so complicated.
Yeah.
When you really take a deep dive.
Yeah, like how do you pick what the injuries, like the main injuries are that you want to have the broad thing, and then how, like you said, how do you go to each individual person and work on their deficits too? I could see how, like you said, that the cookie cutter easy thing could actually be just as beneficial too, because like you said, it's generally making the person stronger. And a lot of times, like especially like high school athletes, they're still growing and their coordination's not the best. So that might just help them more. Which is why I was going to actually ask next, do you think that just different levels of athletes would also need modifications as well, like high school, college, professional, all that stuff?
In terms of the breakdown of, maybe a generic program works great for a high schooler, but then at the professional level, they really need something more individualized.
Yeah.
That's a really great question. And like, there's no evidence that I could really point to that from a research standpoint where I could hang my hat and say like, yeah, this paper supports that idea. I think the one thing that I can say confidently is that at the professional level, well, at each successive level, there's more resources to be able to individualize. So
True,
that's
yeah.
kind of the reality of the situation. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, certainly as you get farther along, well, maybe here's one reason why I could argue into it is that as you get farther along into your career, you have a more extensive injury history, and previous injury is the strongest risk factor for a new injury.
Yep.
And so by virtue of that, if you said, well, a high schooler who's never been injured, like, yeah, they might have other risk factors based on movement or strength deficits or whatever, but the fact that they've never been injured, like they have a cleaner slate versus like Joel Embiid. I'm a Philadelphia and Sixers fan. Like, this guy's a walking injury report. He clearly, I think, would benefit from something that is individualized to his unique situation compared to your average high school basketball player, I guess.
Yeah.
So there's the reality of the logistics of it, coupled with, well, if you have a more extensive injury history, the injury history should likely play into how you're individualizing the program to people.
Yeah, like there's definitely a lot of athletes in sports like that you can make an entire case study just on their injury history. Like him, another big one is like Rob Gronkowski. Like I remember seeing his list of injuries once, and I was like, I don't even know if I want to keep playing after all of these things that they had.
Allen Iverson, to throw back to the 2000s, like he was 6 feet nothing, just played like mile a minute, driving to the basket at like with reckless abandon. I remember seeing a visual on like the morning sports show with all the body parts circled that he had listed on the injury report, and there was no stone was left unturned. Yeah.
Yeah. Or even like
I feel like being in this field, and you guys can agree or disagree with me, but I was thinking about this like earlier in the football season. Being in this field, like healthcare and like research and studying injuries, it's made sports harder to watch, knowing about them, like the injuries. Like it, like put it this way, I'm a diehard, really depressed Jet fan, and when Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles, I knew before anybody. I watched through the replay. I was like, that's his Achilles. I already know.
Yeah,
like,
well, when Tatum did it, Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics did it a few weeks ago. I was like, that's an Achilles, and he's out for the year. Like, I don't like Boston Celtics as a Sixers fan, but I feel for him. And when I watch football, I have a moral, like the angel and the demon of like, man, I know how vicious of a sport this is. And like, I want these guys to kill each other in the sake of the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. So
like you just turn the PT part of the, or like the research part of the brain off for a second, and let's just some good old fashioned Coliseum brutality.
Yeah, no, but it is. You always play armchair. Like I know what that injury is from the side or from the comfort of my couch. But yeah, there's definitely like some moral.
without a doubt.
Debacle.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
It's like you want them to win the championship, obviously, and you're always like, well, maybe we're down, maybe someone will get hurt on the other team, and you never want anyone to get hurt, but you're maybe like, maybe.
The 49ers against the Eagles a couple years ago, like all of their quarterbacks got injured, and like I wasn't mad about it,
Yeah.
Like I felt bad for the guy when he tore his UCL. But the Eagles won, so
See, as a Jet fan, I mean, I was young when it happened, but I unfortunately have to blame the Jets for the birth of Tom Brady, who, when Bledsoe went down, I was just like, oh, okay, like we can win the game. And the next thing you know, this guy Tom comes out and just starts lighting everything up. So it could be a win or a loss when that happens.
That's a really good perspective.
I guess. Sorry, sir. Good.
No, I was gonna say it's terrible that I think about that every time I think about like quarterback injuries.
I guess going a little bit more into your personal fitness, how has all like this research that you've done or you're about to go into affected how you train personally?
Good question. Probably don't take my own advice as well as I should. I mean, I think I have. So I started swimming again a couple years ago, and I am now doing it competitively again. So I do a couple of masters swim meets.
Awesome.
There's a big one every December and March. There's an open water swim that I'm doing in July. So that's fun to be like in my mid 30s. I guess here's an interesting example. So like when I was, and this is kind of a silly example, but when I was in college, I was foolishly but very anti ergogenic aids. And so I use a complicated term to refer to something like caffeine. So caffeine is a performance enhancing substance that is legal, right? In appropriate doses. I had an assistant swim coach who was a Olympic trialist. She was one time disqualified for she was drug tested after a race and had too much caffeine in her system.
Wow.
I don't know. She must have had like 9 cups of coffee before. But so there
I've
are
never
extreme
heard that.
levels.
Wow.
No, I know it's crazy.
I'm impressed.
But yeah, right. So I was hard-headed, and I was like, I'm gonna do this all natural. And I kind of applied that to my sporting career and to my academic career. Like, I'm not gonna drink coffee. I'm just gonna plow through, while everybody else is getting addicted to caffeine and, to finish out their college degrees, like I'm gonna do this all natural. And so I'm 35 now, and I'm like, wow, that was dumb. In hindsight, like caffeine is a creatine, like protein powder, right? Some of these are more protein powder is not really performance enhancing. It's just like, oh, I need to get adequate protein. Creatine has, some documented benefits, very minimal risk, most proven or studied supplement out there. Caffeine as well. So as I am aging up, I'm like, wow, I really shot myself in the foot back then by not giving myself the advantages that are allowed, right? And so now having I guess twofold, having a better understanding of being able to read the research and say, okay, these are safe to use in appropriate quantities, and it's not cheating at all. And then having I'm 35 and I'm over the hill of my peak athletic performance, so I need every advantage that I can get now. So I guess just having a more thoughtful approach to like general, just how I can supplement what I'm doing from a training standpoint. And so from a supplement standpoint, or just like more broadly, I'm swimming, but I'm also doing some running as well, like running 5Ks. I've done a couple of triathlons. And so trying to figure out the best way to organize all of that training in a 7-day week within confines of having a full-time job and several part-time jobs. I think that my expertise helps me to better basically monitor and manage my own training load with all the other stressors.
Yeah.
But I still, I sometimes overdo it for sure. And do probably don't take my own advice as well as if someone were coming to me and explaining to me their situation, and then I would say, well, you need a rest day, or why don't you try to organize your week in this way. I I'm like, well, I'm special, and those rules don't apply to me. You know, I think we all do that.
We're laughing because we do the same thing as physical therapists.
Yeah.
Like I go and tell a patient, like, "Hey, you work at a desk all day. You need to sit up straight." And then I immediately turn and I go like this to start writing my notes. And yeah.
I just sit up tall. But actually, sort of funny, the caffeine thing. I'm still on the no caffeine train. The way I think about it, or I thought about it, is you hear people say all the time, like, "Oh, I can't do this without my cup of coffee in the morning," or I can't stay up and do things. So yeah, that's my fear with caffeine. Like I don't want to become almost like addicted to caffeine and then rely on it for everything.
I don't want to either. And so the way that I've kind of rationalized this in my head is I bought caffeine pills, which sounds kind of crazy, but the dosage is the dosage, right? So like if you go to Starbucks versus Dunkin' Donuts, like you don't know exactly what
it varies.
Yeah. It could be really strong or really weak. So I'm like, this is a 100 milligram tablet. I'm going to take this once a week, maybe twice in the morning before my weekend swim practice. And that's it. And even with that, I have noticed that I've gotten not a tolerance to it, but like when I first started, which was about 6 months ago, like when I took that pill 15, 20 minutes later, like I felt it hit and I was like, let's go. And now I'm like, okay, I think maybe it just got into my bloodstream, but it's not even having as strong as an effect, which is where some people would say, well, let me take 1.5 of these tablets, or let me take 2, or you could take 4 and it would be, I mean, maybe not what I weigh, but like, you know, generally speaking, 400 milligrams of caffeine, if you were having a cup of coffee in the morning and the afternoon, whatever, like you could do that and it's not going to be detrimental to your health, I don't think, except that you might develop that addiction from the standpoint of, oh, if I don't have it in the morning, I can't function, I can't think, I can't do. And like, yeah, I don't want to get there either. So I'm trying to do it in a really thoughtful way. And my other like rule for myself is I'm not going to take it if I'm tired as a way to wake me up.
Yeah.
I'm only going to take it if I've gotten a good night's sleep and I want to have a boost from baseline to above, as opposed to, oh, I'm below baseline.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get myself back to baseline. So I don't know. I'm totally weird about this and probably overthink it, but I guess I feel good about the fact that I've come around a little bit to it.
Yeah.
Because I think I was too close-minded to it that way back when it actually, like I was flirting with making an Olympic or a U.S. Paralympic team. And I'm like, I should have had a caffeine pill before the 100-meter freestyle race. Like that would have given me a little bit of an edge. And I you know, so that's kind of how I'm like, in hindsight, I probably should have. So I'm making amends now.
No, but honestly, in my opinion, you're treating it the right way because as you guys are both sitting here talking about not wanting to get addicted to caffeine, I'm heavily addicted to it. I need the cup of coffee, otherwise I can't function guy. But in grad school too, I was. Oh yeah, listen, I know I'm not alone in it, but to learn from my experience, in grad school was very much, and I still am, but that was like I was crazy about the gym. And I was taking like the pre-workouts. I had like 400 milligrams of caffeine in it in the morning, and then later on I was drinking them. Oh yeah, I was Mr. Hyde. And then later on I was taking either a coffee or like a Monster Energy drink. And then one day I had like heart palpitations playing basketball, and I was like, "What's going on?" And I went to the doctor. And he was just like, "How much caffeine are you drinking?" And I told him, and he's like, "Why don't you stop and see what happens?" Awful to quit, but oh yeah.
It reminds me.
So
that's
kind of like the scary thing, right? Like, oh, I don't. That's that slippery slope fallacy. Like, oh, well, if I start taking one pill or drinking 1 cup a day, I'm gonna become the 8 cups a day guy, and that's not likely to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it does happen, then you can get that under control.
And Travis, like you were saying before, like some people will wait till they're like below normal to take the caffeine to sort of get them back up to normal, and that's sort of my like philosophy for not doing it. Also, like in PT school and college when we're studying for stuff, like I had plenty of friends that would get to like 10 o'clock at night and they'd be like, "Oh, I need to study for another 5 hours," and just keep drinking caffeine. And I was basically just like, If I'm at the point where I'm so tired that I need caffeine, I
Go
should
to
probably
bed.
just go to sleep. I can
Right.
just go to
Yeah. I
bed.
think from my exercise psychology textbook, I think that's an abusive that that would fall under the abuse. Maybe addiction is kind of a like, oh, I'm thinking about it when I'm not drinking it. I'm planning my life around it. That's one extreme, but the step before that is, oh, I'm drinking caffeine at 10 p.m. because I need it to stay awake. Like
Mhm.
that's
Oh yeah.
I guess to sort of revert to something a little bit different. We were talking a little bit earlier about, I guess, the Paralympics and
Mhm.
your sort of journey with that. Could you go a little bit more into it?
Yeah. So like I said, I tried out for the Paralympic swim team in 2012.
Hmm.
I in 2010 and 2011, I set a couple of American records for swimmers missing either an arm or a leg. So that was the category that I swam with,
Hmm.
upper or lower extremity amputees. And yeah, the way that the Olympics, the quadrennium fell. I graduated high school in 2008, was not ready to try out for Beijing, but set my sights on, I think 2012 was London, because I was like, this is perfect. I have 4 years to train in college, and then I'll be ready to try out in
Hmm.
the right at the end of my senior swim season. And so things were looking good. I was setting these records, and then I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis
Oh.
actually 1 week after I set my first American record.
Hmm.
So I was actually very sick
Yeah.
leading up to that record-breaking performance. And then I basically was diagnosed with severe ulcerative colitis. Doctors pretty much said to stop swimming because they felt like that was too stressful for me. I mean, I was swimming 8 times a week.
Yeah.
Multiple morning practices, strength training on top of that, and it was a very, I treated it as not as quite a professional career, but like as close to it as I could, because I had these really lofty goals on top of being a physics major in college. And so I continued to train. I was on a lot of prescription medications for ulcerative colitis, including sometimes like steroid bouts when I was having really bad flare-ups. And so anyway, my senior year I didn't perform as well as I had my sophomore and junior years. I kind of needed for me to have made the team, I would have needed to keep like that steady, well,
Yeah.
drop in times, increase in performance that I was seeing from freshman to sophomore and a junior year. And then senior year, I was just like really sick. So not that that's the only reason I didn't make the Paralympic team. There was also like a 6'4" guy from Australia with one leg that I was trying to compete with, like the Michael Phelps of amputees. And the way the selection for the teams works, it's not just like, oh, I'm the fastest one arm or one legged swimmer in the States. What they do is they rank you against the rest of the world because they want to take
Gotcha.
people who are going to score or get a medal
Hmm.
at Paralympics. So if there was nobody in my category who was like on par with that Michael Phelps guy, then they just wouldn't have taken anybody from my category. So it's not exactly that like I was very good. I
Hmm.
wasn't as good as the 6'4" Australian guy, um, and also I was very sick. So when the Paralympic trials happened, that was 2012.
Hmm.
I pretty much stopped swimming at that point. Like I said, I became a personal trainer. I was lifting a lot, but ultimately my colitis kept getting worse, and I ended up having my large intestine, my colon, removed in
Oh.
2015. So I had a proctocolectomy, and I had a temporary ileostomy for almost a year, maybe 8 months, before having what's called like a reversal of that surgery or a reanastomosis. I might
Hmm.
be saying that wrong, but basically they create a pseudo rectum out of your small intestine so
Hmm.
that you use the bathroom normally, no external pouch. Um, and so I'm actually I just celebrated my 10-year anniversary of the first surgery in April of this year. So I'm colitis free. And my overall health has just gotten so much better since that, which is cool
Understandable.
to be,
Yep.
which is cool to be able to like, pursue these athletic endeavors again in a way that is like I'm fully in a state of health and proper nutrition, as opposed to just like, oh, I need to eat as much as I can, but I actually can't gain weight because I'm severely my digestive system is severely inflamed, right?
Yeah.
So that was, I forget what your question was, but that was kind of the story of the Paralympic thing and some of the challenges that I faced in doing that. But like throughout that, I went to Paralympic Nationals every year. I set these American records. I swam on my college team. Like I said, wasn't competitive with the guys that I was swimming with or against, but enough that I could swim in the meets and not get like completely crushed by the competition.
It is funny, like we were saying before, though. Like, imagine if that didn't happen, how much different your whole life would have been too, like without the ulcerative colitis.
Yeah, no, it like all these things definitely led me down the path that I wound up here in front of you guys. So like I have no regrets for how it turned out. Like, of course it would have been awesome to go to the Paralympics, get the rings tattooed on my bicep like the other guys, but to have gone through the process of training as hard as I did, I feel like I got as much out of it as I nearly would have with the small blip that like I didn't get to go across the pond and represent the country, which obviously would have been really cool.
Yeah.
But like the journey to get there was what it was all about. Or the journey to try to get there was what it was all about.
Yeah,
And the things that you learned from it are invaluable as well. And we're happy that you're doing so much better now, man. That's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah.
To a much lesser extent, it reminds me of my high school discus team, because I was training for such a long time. I felt great going into the state sectionals, and I think it was like four or five people would get to go to like the normal. I forget what's after state sectionals, but the next thing. And the day of the meet, the state sectional meet, it was just pouring rain, and I was wearing like discus shoes, and the rain combined with the discus shoes and a wet circle, I was just slipping all around the circle.
No.
So I just didn't get any good throws. I think I like fouled out with two of them, and then the third one was
devastating.
Yeah. So it's like
you train your whole like years for this moment, right?
Yeah.
And then to not be able to perform at the level that you were hoping to or were expecting to, or
it's like in practice all week, how good you're throwing, and then you go out and it's raining and it's a disaster. And it for some reason that reminds me of your story too, even though it's like I said, to a very much lesser extent, because it was just state sectionals.
Both careers. Well, I don't know what you were playing, like if that impacted your trajectory after that, but like
the truth is, who knows? Like, I probably would have actually been more likely to want to do like track and field in college than I would have been to play football, because like football, honestly, wasn't the best. I was okay. I was a lot better at rugby than I ever was at football. But who knows? With discus, like you have one good throw at a meet, and you can get more colleges to look at you. So it could have. You never really know when it comes down to it.
Yeah, but everything led you down the path that you went down, and you never know if you would have still wound up in the same place. So as long as you're happy with the place that you're at, then you could look back and say, well, I might wish I could kind of done this or that differently, but I'm really happy with where I ended up.
Yeah, everything turned out okay. I have no complaints right now.
You guys got a great podcast. You're working in cool PT settings, so
it's fun. Good time. Now, Travis, you said you recently got back into swimming over the last like 6 months now.
I think I started maybe a year and a half ago. Okay. So it's been a little bit, and I've done a bunch of competitions. I'm not as fast as I was when I was 21 years old, but I'm no slouch, and it's cool to be. Like, I never thought that I would get back into it. My best friend was like, "Hey, we should join this masters team," and I was like, "I guess I'll give it a try. I don't think I have time, but like, we'll see." And now I'm doing it like 3 days a week and like totally hooked and don't ever want to stop. But it's really cool. I remember telling my fiance, like, because I lifted for like 10 years, right? I was like all about the gym, not much cardio, typical gym bro. And when I started swimming again, I said, I feel more like myself than I have in a decade, because I have like not only just the actual aerobic fitness, but the feeling of the confidence also that affords in your daily life. And like, this is kind of silly, but kind of not silly. Like, oh, I can walk up a flight of stairs and not feel winded. And like, that's really cool. And I feel really just capable. And it just, and I trimmed down a little bit. And so looking in the mirror, plus what my body can do at 35, where maybe other people are more over the hill than I am at 35, it feels really good.
Yeah, it actually, again, reminds me of myself. So I got married last year, and we went on a honeymoon, and I gained 25 pounds on the honeymoon.
You did it right then.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Amazing.
How long was the honeymoon, Aaron? It was
11 days.
11 days. That's
11
impressive.
days, 25 pounds.
Where were you?
Antigua. So I say Antigua,
where's-
Caribbean island.
Okay.
Yeah. And we stayed at a Sandals resort. If you've ever seen the commercials, and it's of course all you can eat, and I ate all I could. But recently, I've been training for a Spartan race that I bring up in every podcast.
I was waiting. I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, we're an hour in. We haven't heard that.
Yeah, I had to bring it up. But I noticed, like, before I started training for the Spartan race and getting a little bit more serious about it, I actually had some of the same things. Like, walking up the flight of stairs in my house, I'd be like, why am I breathing heavy? Like, why are all these little things, like, I'm breathing a little bit more than I should have, and now I'm walking up the stairs and I'm not breathing heavy anymore, and it's very nice to not have to worry about the endurance of walking around your house.
Yeah, no, it's a cool feeling, and I didn't know that was missing from my life.
Yeah.
Until I did it again, I realized, like, oh, this is actually a really important part of my identity that I had not neglected, because I had, my athletic identity was intact, right? I'm lifting a ton. I'm doing CrossFit. I'm like super. I can do all these cool things, right? But I used to really strongly value how fit I was in the pool, and so to be able to say that again, to a slightly lesser degree, but still respectably in my perception of it, feels good.
Well, believe it or not, we're already coming up on an hour here. We are probably going to wrap it up there. Travis, thank you again for coming on. You're great to have on.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. This is awesome
Conversation. I really appreciate it.
Do you have any final plugs or anything you'd want to bring up before we wrap up?
That's a good question. Well, you'll tell people where to find me, I suppose.
Yeah, we'll put that in the description or some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super active. I wish I were more active on social media, but there's only so much time in the day, right? But I'm available, if people have questions or want to chat. So
Sounds
Instagram
good.
is a good place for me, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for being on. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and have a nice night.
We hope to have you back again, Travis.